to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now. Breaking news, there has been a shooting at a Christian elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. Officials from the hospital confirmed 3 children were pronounced dead after suffering gunshot wounds. Authorities say the gunman is also dead.
So, you may have heard about this most recent mass shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. And we're just hearing about it now. And so details will continue to come out over the coming hours and days and weeks, even, I'm sure, that will help folks piece this together. But I have some early thoughts about this particular mass shooting event, because there are some interesting elements here that I hope might push us a bit closer to taking our problems seriously in this country, and indeed holding our elected officials accountable. Every time something like this happens, I feel like we get a little bit closer to that tipping point, but this one is decidedly different. So I'll make that clear in just a bit. I'm sure you know by the time you're hearing this what I'm referring to, but I want to start at the beginning here. So I was born in 1982 in Compton, California. And as you can imagine, in a place like that in the 80s, there were a lot of drugs, a lot of guns, a lot of shootouts on my street even, or the next street over. And we'd wake up and, you know, all the streets would be police taped off, and we'd have to figure out a different way to walk to school. So I remember thinking at a very young age, at walking to school age, why don't people just get rid of the guns? And then after a time, the world started to kind of make a little bit more sense. I realized that there's a Second Amendment. I realized that there's no incentive for people to help out in Black and brown neighborhoods the way there would be if there was a crisis in a predominantly white neighborhood. In the same way that there was no real effort to quell the crack epidemic, but there's a massive effort to combat the effects of fentanyl because the community that it affects, right? So these gang shootings that were taking place, there was no one really working, you know, on a government level, you know, with that level of resources. There's no one really working to quell this violence. And then you fast forward a bit, and now it's 1996, and the Columbine high school shooting takes place. A school I've actually been to, and I didn't go to school there, but I visited Columbine. And, you know, that was a national tragedy. These students went into school, and you know the story. And then everyone tried to blame everything. Music they listened to, the video games they played, everything. On why that happened. But now, you know, gun violence had started to peak outside of kind of Black communities, brown communities, into white communities. And then people started to recognize that these senseless gun tragedies and these acts of gun violence could happen anywhere. And You know the story if you were alive and conscious in 1996. You know the story of what happened since then. It's been more or less mass shooting after mass shooting. And they've kind of taken more and more center stage with the rise of the internet, with the rise of, the right in this country moving even further right politically. And we've seen not just school shootings, but we've seen mass shootings, a massive amount of mass shootings. And we saw more school shootings with more white kids. And I don't mean teenagers, I mean kids. I thought a turning point would be Sandy Hook, where there was kindergartners, white kids, mowed down by these war weapons. And there's been no real changes in terms of the laws and so forth. And now that is so old that we have many more instances of kindergartners, first graders, second graders getting shot up at school. And now these school shootings often happen in white schools by white shooters. And you would think that folks would start to take that seriously. Hey, we need to do something about these guns. But that Second Amendment, which in its entirety suggests that, a militia be well regulated. And if you bear in mind what was possible at the time when that was written, you're talking about a musket, more or less, something that you can load one shot and then shoot that one shot, not a automatic handgun or an automatic rifle that you can mow down crowds of people and then load a new clip and then keep at it. And then you end up with massive amounts of people dying. But, that Second Amendment is something that people in this country, especially on the right, just love it. God, guns, and country. And so, the rest of the mass shootings that we see, the racially motivated mass shootings, the church shootings, of course, the school shootings that we're talking about today, they just continue to rack up. So much so that the shooting we're talking about today is, in fact, the 128th mass shooting this year. And a mass shooting is a shooting where 4 people, excluding the shooter, are shot in one incident. And the ones that we end up hearing about are the ones where the death toll tends to be higher, or it's something a little bit more shocking with like children involved or, something like that, which is kind of the way, news media works. Anything that's sensational will be shared, but you, of course, haven't heard about all 128 mass shootings. So let's talk about what we're learning today, because, you may hear this episode after I've recorded it, but this has happened today. So what we know, this from CNN early reporting, is that at least 3 children and 3 adults are dead after the shooting at the Covenant School, a private Christian elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee, that teaches preschool through 6th grade. What else we know is that the shooter was identified as a 28-year-old Nashville woman, and she was killed during gunfire with the police. Her identity and motive are yet to be confirmed because, again, this is still under investigation. So now we have an interesting turn of events because, for the most part, mass shooting events are perpetuated by men. And say what you will, there are a lot of excuses that put distance between who's responsible for changing the laws and who's responsible for carrying out the acts of violence. And I believe that that chasm has allowed the debate, the national debate, to linger as long as it has. I think on some level, everyone knows that the problem is that we have too many guns. But many legislators or many fans and champions of the Second Amendment point to these chat rooms that exist in these little corners and crevices of the internet that allow this very often enough extreme right-wing ideology to fester, to point the finger at, different facets of society. Oh, it's Mexicans. Oh, it's Black people. Oh, it's whatever. And allow this hate to fester. And they have these echo chambers where they can get their racist beliefs off, and other people will parrot those beliefs back to them. And people will espouse mass shooters who have already passed away. They've made a name for themselves in those circles. The Dylan Roofs of the world, people that go in a church and shoot all the Black people. They're now heroes in these chat rooms. And so these people who have reached their wits' end, these people who feel that they've been lied to about what the American dream indeed holds for them, these people who, a lot of times folks will say that they're incels, involuntarily celibate individuals who don't have access to women like they believe they should have, or access to money or prestige, status, wealth, whatever. And they have everyone in the world to blame, because often enough, in those echo chambers, they've managed to blame, the border Mexicans for low wages or whatever. They'll invent something and then blame some group of people, Jewish people, Black people, whatever it is. And so these people end up hating these groups of people, have nothing to do with their prospects in this country. Those in the know will have a more educated, more informed argument. Oftentimes that argument centers around capitalism, and that those people are simply a function of unfettered capitalism. Not everybody wins in a capitalistic playing field. But these folks, in the media will often blame these incel type, very hateful individuals. Elected officials will often blame these folks. And you start to get a profile of who's often enough at fault. These folks on the fringes of society that have no friends, that have no girlfriends, that don't make a lot of money, but somehow have a lot of guns, that have these very hateful ideologies. And one day, their friends in these chat rooms suggest to them that they should go out and get the high score, meaning they should go out and kill the most people, and that they'll be remembered fondly as a hero. And, these folks will look around at their life and feel like their life is worthless, and they could either be remembered for something bad or they could be remembered for nothing at all. And then they go out and commit these heinous acts, right? So you have this profile of these crazy men who have no prospects and they're just pushed to the edge. But folks will look at them and say, well, it's their right as an American to own a gun, or as many guns as they want, that can kill as many people as possible. And because often enough, the people that are champions of the Second Amendment don't want to lose their access to guns, they will allow these incels their access to the guns. And then nobody's getting anywhere with this conversation, right? Again, we all know that guns are the problem. This is not the only country where people have mental health issues. This is not the only country where, there's different people living together, all mixed up in the same society. Look at England, look at France, places like that. There's a lot of different cultures that live in those places as well. And, the list goes on. So Now we're at a point where, because a woman has committed this crime, we can't rely on the same old rhetoric, the same old excuses. Now we have to look at this like, well, this problem goes beyond the typical incels. This problem goes beyond the typical bullied kids. This problem goes beyond the gang violence. This problem goes beyond whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now this problem is affecting pretty much every single facet of society. You know, we've had black mass shooters, and we thought that that would cause something to change or people to take this problem seriously. So now, you know, this conversation, I believe, will come back up. And I'm not saying that this changes everything, but as I mentioned, every single one of these gets us a little bit closer to what I believe will be the tipping point. And because of this one thing, being a little bit different here, it now opens the conversation up to who all could potentially be a mass shooter. Now women is not off the table. Women are very much in play. And that gets us closer to the real conversation, which is guns are in play. Right? I came across a bit of information the other day, and it was a chart that showed that the United States has 393,300,000 guns in the hands of private citizens. And that's more than India, China, Pakistan, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, Germany, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia combined. And folks might say, well, this is a free country. We have the Second Amendment. Many of these other countries do too. Many folks might say, well, the United States is the third largest country on earth. Well, bear in mind, the first and second, China and India, are also on this list. And again, you'll add Pakistan, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, Germany, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, and combine all of them, and we still have more private guns in this country. And so if everybody has a gun, then everybody has access to commit these types of crimes. We have too many guns in the hands of too many people. And the one thing that we forgot about that Second Amendment is well regulated. We have no idea how far this has gone, and nobody has yet done anything to try to remedy this. So far, it's been like, well, that's impractical, so let's not do anything. That would take too long, so let's not do anything. But my hope is that now that we're seeing this affect folks who we wouldn't typically categorize as mass shooters, that hopefully this conversation will start to turn a corner, because we need to fix our gun problem more than anything else. Now, I already know everybody's going to have everything to say, and I open the floor to you. As always, use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. Of course, you can hit me at Ramses Ja on all social media. Let me know what you think, and we'll go from there. All right? And until we do, peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.